All right, I think we're just about ready to get started again. We've got number 31 poised. We appreciate that. A couple of quick announcements, because people are wondering what happens if we run out of time and I've got a number. There's burning questions. And a number of you are coming in. We probably don't need to have people, obviously not. There's lots of seats available. So as was promised by the mayor, if in fact we don't get to everybody today and you have a number as a first-time speaker, there is a commitment to a follow-up meeting. Now some of you are wondering, well, if we get to 56 and I'm 57, do I get to start next time around? The intent would be yes, do the best we can to track that, and then the instruction would be keep your number. So you might have to save this for a month, post it on a bulletin board, frame it, do what you need to do to try to keep track of that. We are up to about 90 odd in terms of deli tickets, but a number of people have handed them in. So we've got about another hour and 45 minutes, and just before the end, we'll keep track of where we are, and then we'll wrap up, and there will be information about a subsequent session if that's required. So thank you for coming back on time, and I think we'll go to number 31.
Thank you. My name is John Coombs, and I live at 1299 Traxel Avenue. It borders on the Cedar Hill Golf Course, and my property is part of the impacted properties under this bylaw. First, I'd like to thank the mayor and all the council members for being here tonight. I really do appreciate the opportunity for all of you and for all of us to be able to give you our perspectives. Some of it logical, some of it right from the heart, and we heard lots of it tonight. I was going to talk about things like communication, due process. I was going to talk about loss of property or inalienable property rights. Unknown to me when I purchased the property. I was going to talk to you about things like the right of council to make both the bylaw under the current conditions, the moral right of that, the legal right, and most importantly, maybe from your perspectives individually, is the political consequences of some of this. But we've heard of all that tonight, and I think one of the other things that you were asking for is, well, how do we move forward? And I'm not sure where you guys are going to take all this after it's all said and done, but it does seem to me that if we go back to grassroots and look at what we're doing, why we're doing it, then one of the things that I would really recommend that council direct to staff is that you actually do a proper business case. My background is in government, and when government looks at major infrastructure investments and major programs that impact people, we actually do proper business cases. And those business cases don't just look at the financial side of things, and you've heard a lot about real property loss issues here, but there's also other costs and benefits that come out from an economic perspective that come far deeper. Things like the loss of rights and the loss of freedom for people to even use their own property, as the person up on Tudor Avenue was describing. So I would really recommend that you actually do a proper business case looking at social cost benefits. And my suspicion is that when those social costs are added up into financial dollars that impact people, and how and if we should compensate people for it, I suspect that if we were to compensate the loss, the real economic loss to people from this bylaw, then, and that loss was paid for by the taxpayers of Saanich, that you'd have a lot more people in this room. Because I think we're looking at, I have no idea what the number is, but certainly in the multi-millions of dollars range that has to be compensated. Whether it's compensated by property owners, by individuals through the impact of these type of bylaws on individuals' hardship, or whether it's compensated through other economic, financial resources. But I really do encourage you to go back to the grassroots, identify what the problem is, identify what options we have to deal with it, because I think the problem needs to be stated really clearly. I think the problem, and put into perspective where the province and where the federal government and where the world is going now on the environmental side, is well supported. But what are our options and how to deal with it? What are the consequences of those options? And which one is the best strategy for us moving forward on? So thank you very much.
John.
Gary Morrison, 3025 McAnally. My current house structure is not within the EDPA zone. However, a lot of land is included in that zone because 2 probably extirpated plants were previously observed a quarter to a half mile away. One was last seen 50 years ago, the other was last seen over 60 years ago, despite several surveys during the intervening time period. Therefore, I request that my property and those of my neighbors be removed from the EDPA. While the preservation of sensitive and diverse ecosystems is a laudable goal, the EDPA bylaw is the wrong vehicle. It represents regulatory overreach and redundancy with existing provincial and federal regulations. Contrary to any doctrine of fairness, the bylaw places the full burden of the cost on the minuscule percentage of landowners within the zone, supposedly for the benefit of the entire community. The latest version involving invasive species seizes the council's power and concentrates and grants all authority to the manager of environmental services without controls or balance. Good governance requires balance, and these bylaws are far from that. For example, the bylaws affect private property owners, but they exempt public property controlled by Sanex, including its parks. These parks harbor many invasive species and provide a base for those species to colonize nearby properties included in the zone. The 2014 environmental plan for Saanich Parks mostly addresses human recreational uses and gives short shrift to conservation, which is at odds with the goals of the bylaws. I've heard the flawed biologist's take on economics that the EDPA creates value for homeowners. However, the reality is just the opposite. By taking away buildable square footage and by creating uncertainty with respect to current and future regulations and unrecorded encumbrances, the bylaw reduces the size of the buying pool, which reduces demand and land values in real terms. Over time, the result will ultimately be a reduction in the tax assessed values of properties located on the waterfront and near Gary Oaks relative to all other properties, and a shifting the property tax burden to those presumably unaffected properties. The problem is that the EDPA affected owners who are elderly or who have to move are impacted the most today, while those who continue to live in their affected properties for several decades will benefit from lowered property taxes to offset their current losses. This situation is not fair and makes no economic sense. Do you think unaffected property owners and renters would be willing to give up 20 to 90% of their property or of their gross wages or salaries before income taxes to the EDP affected owners? I doubt it. Under the Species at Risk Public Registry Purpose modified October 2014, the Species at Risk Act will, quote, recognize that compensation may be needed to ensure fairness following the imposition of the critical habitat prohibitions, end quote. Numerous government publications have emphasized the need to incorporate socioeconomic factors into decision-making and assign priorities based on scientifically transparent information. They've also cited the need for cooperation that can be achieved through education and incentives. The bylaws use a heavy hand and ignore the human component, contrary to the principles outlined by the federal and provincial agencies. Scrap the bylaws entirely because they only serve as disincentives to protect endangered species. Under the EDPA regime, I will not plant any native species for fear of more draconian regulation in the future. In place of restrictive regulations, create incentives, including grants, subsidies, or tax breaks, and provide education to obtain voluntary cooperation as outlined by senior government agencies. Because both money and land are scarce, prioritize the properties for protection based on independent scientific analysis and verification, rather than restrict all land that has a potential for recreation or reimagining of habitats. If conservation easements are needed, compensate the landowners with cash or with offsetting development rights, such as clustering. Success or failure hinges on what happens at the margins. If the EDPA affected property owners do not buy into the protection of sensitive habitats on their properties, there will be no expansion of or benefit to those habitats. If those property owners lose property value, the whole municipality reduces its tax base and everyone else ultimately picks up the tab. If Saanich fails to remove the bylaws and continues to support this overreach, what controversial plan does it have to cure the problem of the planet's most invasive species that underlies the problem of loss of sensitive habitats. Use some common sense and eliminate the EDPA and invasive species bylaws and replace them with incentives and education to obtain everyone's voluntary cooperation, including the people that don't want to be included in it.
Thank you, Gary. Do we have number 33? I know 34 is no longer with us tonight. 33, 34, I think we can count, 35.
Ready?
All right, great, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Marilyn Kuss, and our property is 3028 Admirals Road. We have 50 feet of waterfront. None of it is sensitive ecosystem. Along the shoreline, there's a 50-foot retaining wall. It goes retaining wall, a flower garden, a retaining wall, a patio, a retaining wall, a flower garden, and into lawn. By then we're in the buffer, and the rock and garden and lawn is there. Perhaps the most important aspect of our property is that following a request we made at the last open house, we had a visitation on October 22nd. Michael Roth from Environmental Services came to discuss our proposal. We were basically assured that we would not have a problem because it would be a minimal intrusion into the EDPA buffer. He was very nice, but I wasn't particularly satisfied. I began to wonder about the actual site inspection process. Are there different levels or different types of site inspection? What are the criteria for site inspection? Is there a checklist? Is there a written report? What duty does the site inspector owe to the property owner? Does the site inspector owe a duty to report our patio, our retaining walls, our pathway, our stairs, our lawn, our rock garden, and the rock outcroppings? Would our visitation qualify as a site inspection? If so, did this visitation become a site inspection that could be used to validate the mapping that shows our property as environmentally significant area? Saanach's information sheets say, if the mapping appears inaccurate on your property, contact Saanich Environmental Services to make an appointment to visit you at your property. Staff can exempt proposal based on their findings until such time as the mapping is amended by council. So you see, I feel we could be caught in a catch-22. Our site visit was never about amending the map. However, now we've had a visit and we have not asked for amendment, would the planning department draw the conclusion that we accept the map to be accurate? Well, if so, I would like to disabuse them. No, we don't think it's accurate. Using their own map and the tools of the map provided, we found part of our setback depth measured 33.3 meters from the natural boundary, a discrepancy of 3.3 meters in the buffer. Given that the map, not an on-the-ground survey, is the basis for the Environmental Services initial ruling, errors in setting a map's EDPA boundary are ones that we could have to live with, or we'd have to hire a surveyor to dispute. So in conclusion, anyone that has some proposal in mind that would require an EDPA permit, I would encourage you to contact Saanich Environmental Services and make an appointment to visit you at your property. But make it clear from the outset that you would like an accurate survey as well as a formal summary of the site inspection, and that you would like to have someone put in writing that it is their professional opinion that your property belongs or does not belong in the EDPA as an environmentally sensitive area. Perhaps council could take this into consideration when it amends the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you know the drill. Who's next? 36? Probably don't need me to count, but 37?
39?
Going once? We got a winner. Oh no, we got 38?
No, I'm 37.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is June Pretzer. I think some of you know me. I'm here to speak on behalf of the EDPA because I think it's a positive move forward for sustainability in our natural areas. Sorry, just a bit hot here. I know I've heard a lot of criticism about this movement, and so I'm going to just give you a little bit of my background. I've worked in conservation for in Vancouver Island and some of our lands here. Oh, geez.
Thanks for doing my job.
You're welcome. I worked in Stanley Park recently as their conservation manager. I've done a lot of work, environmental management, but I've also, in my dark history, was a realtor for a very long time. So I understand both sides of the story. I understand how people feel when they're not getting what they believe their property is worth, but I also know that property is worth exactly what somebody pays for it. I find it odd that this particular EDPA has an effect on property that an easement doesn't, or a stream development permit doesn't. Why is it this particular one has this apparent effect on the market value? And I kind of wonder if it really does. So I would like myself proof. Prove it to me. I would like to see these assessments. Show me that that property really was assessed at that and that it should have sold at that. Because what it sells for is what it's worth. So that would be one thing. I also, I want to talk about...
I think it's important that you allow June to speak. Everybody's had the courtesy to allow others to speak on another point of view, so June should get the same treatment.
Thank you. I want to speak specifically about the property on Rainbow Road, because I'm close to that property. I managed Christmas Hill for a long time. Those trees, whereas people say there's nothing growing there except a bunch of grass, well, that's because the fellow that lived there, they're darling people, but he mowed it for years and years and years. If you were to walk 20 feet off the end of his property, you would see in the springtime lush camas, wildflowers blooming away because it wasn't mown. If you look up into the canopy, you would see that that canopy connects almost with Swan Lake, right to the top of Christmas Hill and all around. That canopy actually is a really integral part of that ecosystem. It's not just what's growing at your feet, it's what's above you too. So in that upper canopy, you get all kinds of insects moving up and down, you get birds, you get all kinds of things. So when people are saying to you, oh, it's just a bunch of old trees, there's nothing growing there, it's rock, it's because they don't really have the training or the background or the scientific background to understand those things. And I think it's really important that we take the steps to teach people. Why is there rocky outcrop a sensitive ecosystem? It's because it's the only place that a lot of these things can grow. They don't, like, we could have prickly pear cactus growing at 10 Mile Point. We don't. Why? Because it's trampled. We can have all kinds of things growing all over the place. Why? Well, because we live in an urban area. And managing an urban lands is much different than managing lands that say, well, Islands National Park. But still, they are lands that we can restore. And in the EDPA, it says that there's not just for what's there, but for the potential for restoration. And that's what I do, restore ecosystems. What else? I don't know, I guess, I think that also I'll say this. I want to say this about invasive species. I know darn well how hard the volunteers on the Pulling Together program work throughout the parks in the district of Saanich. They work so hard, hundreds of people. we just don't have the manpower to actually do this work. We could take a lot of tax dollars, let's do it. Take tax dollars and hire gangs of people to do it, right? I mean, I know how many people it takes to clear the hedgerow in Swan Lake. That took me 3 years of community service workers working there almost every day to clear that area. So, saying that invasive species, you have a species, also I want to say I was the chair of the invasive species committee for Vancouver Island, so I know exactly what the challenges are. So, I support you. There may need to be some work done on this. Certainly you need to listen to the landowners if they're suffering or they're promised, but you need to find out how you can make this move forward so that it supports our natural areas. And I also want you to look at the demographic. Everyone here will not be here in 20 years. What about our youth? Well,
let's hope that's not necessarily the case.
but hey, in general,
Okay.
where are the 19-year-olds?
Okay, let Jude finish. You got about, I don't know, 20
Yeah.
seconds. Oh, actually, that's
I'm done.
perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jude. I think our next speaker's ready, so we're moving nice and swiftly.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for hosting this event. My name is Eric Daly, and I'm the chair of the Cadbury Bay Residents Association, which includes Cadbury Bay, 10 Mile Point, and Queenswood. As of last night, the Cadbury Bay Residents Association did not have an official position on the EDPA. However, we're very aware of all the signs in our neighborhood. My email string is getting longer and longer. My phones are being ringing more and more about EDPA. And I've been advised that if there are no positive changes to this bylaw by the spring of 2016, a motion to leave Saanich and join another municipality will be made at our AGM in accordance with Section 29 of the Local Government Act, and I will accept that motion. Thank you.
All right, let's move on. Great applause. Number 40, I think we're at number 40. All right, here we go. Thank you.
Well, I'm not actually sure what the proper form of address is for the people sitting in front of the room, but I think what I'd like to do is use just, like 20 seconds of my allotted 5 minutes, rather than trying to find the right way to express appreciation and respect for the people in front of the room. I want to turn around and express appreciation and respect for all the people in the back of the room, because they've clearly spent a lot of time to prepare themselves for the discussions today and given a lot of thought to what it is that they have to say. So my thanks and appreciation to everybody who's standing behind me here. Where to begin? I thought the town hall, so I thought I would just stand up, get up here and talk, which I can do for a long time. Well, just a little background. My name is Ken. Where do I live? 34 seconds. On Cordova Bay Road, past Death Curve. And you all know what Death Curve is. It's the curve that was put on Cordova Bay Road to calm traffic, where they put a curve in, where 93% of the cars go out there and count them, cross over the median, because no car in the universe could possibly navigate that curve and stay on the right side of traffic. 34 seconds from where I live. So on the basis of that, you can figure out where I live. Okay. We live in a house, it's on the beach. I've worked 2 jobs for the last 35 years. My wife's worked 2 jobs for the last 35 years. My mother worked till she was 78. You put it all together, what do you end up with? A house on the beach. That's where we live. I believe I'm a steward for the Habitat Acquisition. I just want to be clear where I'm coming from. I'm a steward for the Habitat Acquisition Trust. They came and they met with us a couple of years ago. It was fabulous. It was wonderful. They walked our property from top to bottom and they said, oh, you like to grow this? Yeah, well, there's a native version of this that you could grow. Great, what's it called? And we wrote it down and that's what we put in. And they were sort of nice and genteel about the way, about their comments on the way we pruned our trees, which was sort of sad, but they helped us out and instructed us on a better way of taking care of our trees. We actually like trees. We get out there and do battle with all of this stuff that the invasive stuff, because as you probably noticed, it rains a lot here, and it's really, an outstanding environment for all kinds of things to grow, including the things you don't want there and the things that don't come from here. So we do battle, okay? In any event, I work in the healthcare system. So I'm not here, I'm not really impacted that much at this point in time by the EDPA. My kids will be, and then you're going to have to deal with them, and then you are really in trouble. But I'm okay. So really I'm here just because the whole situation sort of offends my sense of fairness and justice, and I don't like my sense of fairness and justice to be offended, so I'm going to speak today without trying to sound too offended. I work in the healthcare system, and these days as a data person, where we work and take very seriously our obligation to the public, and we never lose sight of our trust relationship with the public. So I'm looking at the manner in which the EDPA was implemented through the same set of lenses that I would apply if we were contemplating a significant change to the way that we deliver services to vulnerable people. We don't treat plants well, we treat microorganisms, but it's really tiny things, but not trees. I'd also note that we are also well aware that if our policies or practices were encountering what the public sees as in their best interest, the situation in question are likely to garner a great deal of publicity that takes up a lot of our time and prevents us from doing what it is that we're supposed to be doing. So we try not to do that sort of thing. What I'm seeing here is the implementation of a policy that falls far below what I would regard as an adequate level of review, examination, and public dialogue prior to implementation. I would note that we have standards around informed consent where I work. They are legislative, and we distinguish those standards of informed consent from a minimum token level of notification, and we make sure that we don't confuse the two. So I just put that out there. Various financial figures out here have been bandied about. I'm wondering if Saanich has done a study of what the net total, estimated what the net total financial impact of this is on the people who are affected. I played with some numbers because I'm a numbers guy. Well, now I'm a numbers guy. And I just did a really conservative estimate, figuring 1%, 2,000 houses, 1% loss of value. I came up with a number, $20 million. 5% loss, that'd be $100 million. And based on some of the kind of numbers that I'm hearing tonight about what people may have lost, assuming that that is not, that loss is not concentrated disproportionately, just a very small number of properties, we're talking about a really, really significant loss. And when the FOI requests come in, which they will, asking to see the results of the studies, and either you'll have to produce the numbers or you're going to have to show that you haven't done the studies, which is also going to be kind of a dodgy situation. I think that those numbers are not
And that's
really
time, sorry. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Once again, appreciate the fact for the open house. I know it's not always easy to be on that side of the table, but of course you're elected to represent us, and I appreciate the fact that we are having this, and everybody took the time to come here as well. I just have a couple of points to make, I guess, and theoretically I won't use my 5 minutes, so I'll get right to the point where I will. When I bought my house in 2001 in Saanich, I based that purchase on that Saanich was a great place for my kids to raise my kids, great place for myself and my family, and not least of which, an investment. So I purchased my house in Saanich in both the Western communities. I bought an older house instead of a new house for the dollar value, based upon that the area I bought in had a solid reputation for holding value, and that was going to be our nest egg for me and my wife when we're retired. I am 5 years away from mandatory retirement, and like most people, my mortgage is significant. But I've always talked to my wife, who worries about money a lot, and said, not to worry, sweetheart, the equity in the house is far worth more than the mortgage. At the end of the day, if something really bad happens to us in our personal lives, we can sell our house, pay off the mortgage, have enough money to buy a condo or a townhouse, because that's our roots, condo. So I am greatly worried and concerned for me and my family that I am smack middle within this bylaw. My whole property is there. Totally there. And I'm not getting into the discussion whether it should be or not, because I think there's probably some merits it should be. However, when I purchased my property, I bought it with the faith of the Broadmead Covenant and the land of the law, federal, provincial, municipal. So I was quite prepared to accept the covenant with its total restrictions. My concern is there's going to be a third restriction. So would you buy my house knowing the loss of the land, the Broadmead Covenant, which is quite restrictive, and I accepted that, and now a third one. Whether it really impacts the property or not, because I have a certain amount of frontage with my house and property, you're not likely to build onto it, but just a psychological thought that why would I buy that property when there's houses around that guy that are not part of that bylaw, right? So I think you really need to look at the human factor here. I plan on being around 20 years or so from now, so it's fine and dandy. We're all about the environment, right? But it's also about my family, my well-being, my financial well-being. The other thing is the invasive species, and I understand it's not a done deal, but just sort of an irony of it is we have blackberry bushes that we actually quite happily tackle every spring and spend 2-3 hours and think we beat it, next year it's back, like holy cow, right? And unfortunately, the blackberries come from Sanish property. Okay, so just a little note there. We're quite happy to do our part. And I just want to finish off by saying I'd rather pay Sanish my full tax base than take a hit on my property value and pay you less. Thank you very much.
Got to be someone next, right? I think we're at 42, if I'm tracking this right. And we might be launching ahead with new numbers because people have come and gone. 42, and you'll know what's next. 33. Ask your number, please.